Welcome to Egberto Off the Record. Today we're honored to have William K. Black, also known as Bill Black. Bill Black is an associate professor of economics and law at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, UMKC, and a distinguished scholar in residence for financial regulation at the University of Minnesota Law School. He is a white-collar criminologist. He was the executive director of the Institute for Fraud Prevention from 2005 to 2007. He taught previously at the LBJ School of Public Affairs at the University of Texas at Austin, my alma mater. I love that institute where you actually taught at, and at Santa Clara University, where he was also the distinguished scholar in residency for insurance law and a visiting scholar at the Marcola Center for Applied Ethics. He is the author of the acclaimed book. Remember this one, guys? The best way to rob a bank is to own one. And I think he really means that. Anyway, welcome to Egberto Off the Record, El Señor. Bill, how you doing this afternoon?
I'm very well. Thank you so much.
Well, look, I'm honored to be with you. No, look, your introduction hadn't done justice for you at all, especially with what you've done with the savings and loans, and I could go on and on. But then we'll take the first 15 minutes to describe all the stuff that you've done. So I figured we'll leave it there. There's a lot that we could talk about, but there is something that you did in an interview with Patrick that really touched me. And that is when you said, we do not have to wait for an election. I'm paraphrasing. We don't have to wait for an election to actually get the ball rolling on what needs to be done to actually get this country right. We can actually use the law. And with that, I'm going to say, Bill, run.
Okay, so this strategy of waiting and hoping to win a midterm election that is still, 16 months out type of thing, and then you have to wait till January and then hope everything goes well, with the Supreme Court actively in just 2 days ago, an oral argument indicating that it's probably going to wipe out most minority Democratic districts in the old Confederacy and border states, is an insane strategy, right? There's no reason to wait. The whole theory of it is to get subpoena authority. Well, we have subpoena authority now. They're called state legislatures and state attorney generals. And I invite, of course, Republican brethren to do this as well, but I'm not naive. They're very unlikely to hold hearings about Trump and such, but the Democrats certainly can, and they have one or both houses in roughly 20 states, and the state attorney generals as well. The idea is to do what worked before. In absolutely impossible circumstances in the savings and loan debacle, what worked was whistleblowers. And humans react not to statistics. We're moved not by statistics, but by narrative, by stories. This is the art of storytelling, but in this case, about real events and why they affect people. And whistleblowers are perfect for doing exactly that. But often they can't testify without being bankrupted because of non-disclosure agreements, NDAs. However, if the states or the federal government or the attorney generals subpoena your testimony, then the non-disclosure agreement cannot be used to block your testimony. So let's do that. Let's have the best whistleblowers, the ones that can tell that narrative, and in particular, take advantage of the fact that the United States has more whistleblowers than the rest of the world combined. And we have the best person protecting whistleblowers of anywhere in the world. And this is by far, this is the Government Accountability Project, GAP. right? And its leader, who's run it for 40 years and is an expert attorney in advancing and protecting the cause of whistleblowers. He already has over 1,000 whistleblowers. That's a figure from 8 weeks ago. And they were adding 100 a week. Plus, if you want to win the midterm, you have to act strategically and not just try to huddle and play defense, but actually counterpunch, God forbid. I'm not talking about violence. I mean with the facts. Again, the whistleblowers can come forward and explain, I was in this conversation with this very senior person who you can identify, who told me we're going to do this, even though that was unlawful. And I told him this was going to cause American people to die. And he said, this is what we're going to do anyway. Plus, senior whistleblowers know where all the documents are and what documents existed and what documents they tried to destroy. Better yet, the ones they think they destroyed all the copies of, but they haven't.
Wayback Machine.
Right. The whistleblower knows. Think, for example, in these flaky prosecutions where vindictive prosecution is going to be a defense, but where you actually have whistleblowers had discussions with the people that made the decisions to have prosecutions based on politics and could testify, yes, I was in the room when he or she explained that they were going to ruin this bastard because, you know, he had turned on Trump and was explaining telling the truth.
Let me stop you for a second there, Bill. I need an explanation of something, because we're talking about what state attorney generals can do and what what folks can do at the federal level. Well, we're shot at the federal level. If I understand the way things work, I don't think we have any subpoena power on the federal level. Am I correct or incorrect?
Well, you're correct. That's exactly why this strategy is a state-based strategy. Don't wait 2 years for the possibility that you might win a midterm election sufficiently to get control of the House, such that you control committees and can issue subpoenas.
So my next question is then, if that is the case, are you saying that state reps, or not only state reps, but let's say the attorney generals of different states, do they have the ability to subpoena federal records?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Sure. They do it all the time.
And is the federal government responsible for providing that subpoenaed state record?
Provide that, yeah, compared in response to the subpoena, that's exactly right. And wouldn't it be great if what they did is stonewall, which is
right
what they would do, and say, no, we're not going to give you any of those documents. But more to the point, whether or not they answer the subpoena, frequently the whistleblower has the document.
Okay, I see what you're saying. You're saying even if the federal government doesn't want to release the data officially, if the whistleblower has the data themselves, however they got it, they wouldn't be harmed by turning that over to the state. Do I understand that correctly?
Not that they would be harmed. We would be able to make public that document. Right now, they may be subject to non-disclosure agreements, which is a contract, right?
Right.
A coercive contract that says we can bankrupt you if you release any of this information. But if you respond to a subpoena, state or federal, and provide the information, for example, the documents, then that doesn't violate the non-disclosure agreement.
Well, let me ask you another foolish question then. Whenever a state judge, let's say, go ahead and apply a subpoena, can a federal court block that subpoena?
Unclear, depends on the circumstances, but you don't need a state judge to issue the subpoena. the committee and the AG have their authority already to issue the subpoena.
Okay, so then the next question is, so I imagine the idea is issue the subpoena, respond quicker than a federal judge can respond to get it out there, quickly.
Well, the federal judge is going to have no basis for saying that you can't respond to a state subpoena.
Ah, okay.
So no, you don't have to beat them to the punch. But you're right. I think you will see desperate efforts to go to the federal courts to prevent the release. And what do American people hate in particular? A cover-up.
Right.
That fails, where you release the document, which has in their own words the slimy things that they're going to do, which they lied and said there was no such document.
Now, I think you alluded to when you took care of some of the research and I think convictions and in the I think it was the savings and loan debacle. Is this some of the processes that you guys used?
I was the whistleblower in the savings and loan debacle. I was the serial whistleblower that blew the whistle on the 5 U.S. senators who tried to coerce us into backing down against Charles Keating, who was the most notorious fraud in the savings.
I remember.
Those became known as the Keating Five. I blew the whistle on the Speaker of the House, a Texan, of course, Jim Wright.
Jim Wright, a Democrat.
Well, of the 5 senators, 4 of them were Democrats.
Right.
Jim Wright was a Democrat.
McCain was a Republican.
So the prominent public officials, I, a Democrat, blew the whistle on 5 of the 6 were Democrats. I have never, ever hesitated to turn in Democratic criminals. Right.
Right.
And we put over 1,000 elite officials, private officials, bankers, thrift types, in prison, well over 1,000, ultimately about over 7,000 convictions. Many of those folks were Democrats. I had 4 or 3 other colleagues who were with me at the Keating 5 meeting. To this day, I don't know what political party the other 3 are. We never discussed those kinds of things. It had nothing to do with our decision making. I also blew the whistle on a number of top agency officials who, again, had basically cowered under the threats of Charles Keating. When they removed our jurisdiction, our was being the San Francisco regulators in this context, the folks in Washington that gave in, the chief of staff of the whole agency, said, we did you a favor. These guys, Keating, are so powerful and nasty that they can, quote, get you in ways you'll never know you've been gotten, unquote.
Wow.
Keating, of course, and Keating was a lawyer, put in writing, highest priority, get Black, kill him dead.
He didn't.
Oh, yes, he did. Hired private detectives at least twice that we know of, sued me for $400 million in my individual capacity, got our jurisdiction over Lincoln Savings removed by these cowardly heads of our agency so that he can continue his depredations. So the head of our agency resigned in disgrace after we blew the whistle on him and his, other leader. So, yeah, this is an area that I know, not just because it's in the heart of my academic expertise. I know from reality. And more to the point, I know this strategy can work in impossible circumstances. Because imagine it, a majority of the House of Representatives co-sponsored a resolution telling us not to re-regulate the industry. And we went forward anyway. That resolution was signed by every leader of both party. In other words, the Speaker of the House Majority Leader, the House Whip, the minority leader, the minority whip, both parties' leadership unanimously said, don't do this. The administration, of course, didn't want us to do it. The administration threatened to make a criminal referral against us on the basis that we were closing too many insolvent thrifts.
Man,
our job is to close insolvent
What
thrifts.
year was that again? I'm trying to remember, because I remember when this was daily on the news.
Yeah, this is the 1980s to the mid 1980s to the early 1990s.
Right. Exactly. Now, let me ask you now, because we're kind of talking about what the procedure would be. Let me ask you let's take it into today.
Yep.
You're going to lead a whole group of folks that are going to start this agenda. Where would you start?
Well, if God made me a leader, we're recommending this. I'm not the leader.
But I'm saying I am naming you the leader. What do we do
for the day? So I would work with the Government Accountability Project, who we are working with and have been working with for months at the highest possible level. We would identify the whistleblowers who are desirous of going public. They want to get the word out, but are, again, threatened with bankruptcy through things like non-disclosure agreements.
Mm-hmm.
The states, the various committees, would issue a subpoena, or the state attorney general, or both, calling for their testimony on the substantive matter. It might be, for example, in Texas, a very terrible case, FEMA, Federal Emergency Management, right? And the failures, the destruction of FEMA's capacity to help people avoid, dying in floods and such. The states can hold hearings on that. Right? There's no restriction on the states doing so. And they could get whistleblowers from inside FEMA. By now, they will have left FEMA. But those folks will have firsthand knowledge, be able to tell a story, a narrative, not a bunch of statistics. It'll be a story of courage and a story of cowardice simultaneously.
Now, you just named Texas. Who is going to, the whistleblowers in Texas, who is going to hear them?
So in Texas, I would not do it, obviously, through I would invite the Texas legislature. I would invite the Texas legislator to do it, but they're not going to do it.
They're not going to do it. But let me tell you why I brought up Texas, right? Texas is a big state that when we turn, it's going to be an avalanche, right? And I know you've heard of the Guadalupe River floods. In fact, I think that's the reason you brought that up. And with the Guadalupe floods, we can actually show the incompetence not only of the local government, but we can show the chain right up to Dan Patrick and the governor. But there's nobody that's willing from all these whistleblowers that you're talking about that's going to do an investigation. My question was, do other states have some sort of even if it's nominal, to kind of say, let's bring these whistleblowers in from Texas to show what has been done? After all, Texas has its national court in Illinois.
Absolutely. FEMA's a national agency. If FEMA's capacity is being ruined, that's an issue for every state. So every state has a legitimate interest of its legislature in holding hearings about FEMA. And the witnesses, of course, could include classic, disastrous screw-ups. They don't have to occur in, say, Minnesota.
Right.
They could have occurred in Texas. Now, it's only going to be people willing to testify.
Oh, yeah, we understand that. But what you're saying is that under your scenario, the threat that a lot of these people would have for losing their livelihood, for being sued, would be mitigated because of the framework under which you are building, putting this all together.
That's exactly right. especially the ability to threaten to bankrupt folks. So yes, you're absolutely right. This works not just in blue states, it works in every state because the problems aren't there are state by state problems, but the fundamental problems are national.
The federal into a state, which if they screw up in Texas, they could, if it's not fixed, they could screw up in Oregon, they could screw up in California, they could screw up in any state. And as such, you have what is standing, I guess is the word.
Yeah, it's standing as a particular
not official legal standing. I'm saying reason.
Yeah, you have a basis. You have a legitimate basis to inquire into FEMA's weaknesses, for example. But of course, not just FEMA, the FBI, ICE, you name it. All of these are federal agencies. And so by definition, they do things in every state. And so every state can inquire into problems in those, especially because we're a federal system. And so almost always those federal agencies are supposed to work with the states. FEMA, for example, is supposed to have liaison. Most of the people that respond are not FEMA employees, they're state employees.
This is ingenious, if I must say it myself. Very, very ingenious. And let me tell you something, Bill. This is what many a times upsets me with the Democratic Party. The Republican Party has always attempted to work out of the box. In fact, that's how we got Donald Trump working outside of the box. Who the hell believed that Donald Trump would have crossed all the I's and crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's to become what he has and to have Volt and these guys doing what they do? Who would have thought that? But somehow, you thinking outside of the box like that is something that you should be able to get a posse and get investments into doing this kind of stuff. Sometimes I wonder if it's on purpose why the opposition party doesn't do things like this. Your thoughts on that?
As you can tell from the fact that I've blown the whistle on some very senior Democrats and made myself unemployable in the federal government for the rest of my life as a result. I think that the senior leadership of the Democratic Party's 16% popularity, favorable rating, is about there on merit.
Yeah.
So, and I agree with you that their inability to think creatively and boldly, I would say the inability to be bold.
I want to take it further than that, and I want to see if I can buy in an agreement with you. There are people that would say the parties are the same. I know that is not the truth. The parties are not the same. But the leadership and what we call the establishment of both parties, I think because they serve the same, and I don't want to get into ideological battle here, but because they serve sort of a capitalist agenda.
So you'll like us. You'll like us because we say exactly or something very similar to where you're going, I think. So one of our critiques is it is not enough to say no kings. It's got to be no kings and no robber barons. Because if we just change from one party's robber barons to another party's robber barons, we're still ruled by the robber barons.
Right.
And it's pretty clear Trump doesn't much decide things, right? He's more of a puppet of this collection of kooks and very wealthy people.
Yeah.
The taco trade, for example.
Think about this. If this guy had any level of intellect and the people that worked for him had any level of intellect, the puppeteers who are really the billionaires, they would have already had the country. Because the truth of the matter is, when I read the Constitution and when I read how the different options that we have, many a times it turns out that we depend on people being relatively honorable. Even in what you are talking about doing right now, what would be legally feasible is that people out there are good people willing to engage and do that?
So this is the chicken and egg problem, and why I emphasize stories, and why also it can't be dependent on party and it can't be dependent on traditional media, right? We want to, there are well over 1,000 whistleblowers already associated with GAP. Again, the Government Accountability Project.
Right.
Tons of them, and growing at a very fast rate. And if whistleblowers saw that what they were doing could make a difference, whistleblowing would further expand, right?
Right.
So this is a huge, huge benefit. Plus, my wife and I used to be federal programs branch attorneys at the Justice Department in an earlier life, which is to say we were the ones that defended federal programs and constitutionality and such, right? So guess what? 80% of the federal programs branch attorneys have quit under Trump.
I wonder why.
Because they refuse to do unethical things.
And I mean, again, I repeat what I just said, right? The flaws, and people hate, they think I'm anti-constitution or whatever, but the Constitution was written assuming they were going to be good people, not only abiding by it, but interpreting it. And what we've seen is the degradation of that. When we see a Supreme Court that has given the kind of immunity that this president has allowed him to go buck wild, when we have a Supreme Court that now may put the entire voter rights in jeopardy, when we have a Supreme Court that no longer follow precedents, I think, again, our last solutions may be, again, the goodness of people implementing somewhat what you're talking about right now.
Well, and let me emphasize, this is only point one in our plan. All right. We agree that we have to completely reform whole sectors. We've got to destroy the power of the robber barons over all parties, not just a single party, right? We need to restore a rule of law, which means fundamentally fixing the Supreme Court, which has become a leading enemy of the rule of law and the Constitution, and a leading ally of the robber barons, right? It is abandoned law. So people like myself, my spouse, where we try to teach law, we're in crisis now. How can you teach your students that there's a rule of law and that you follow precedent? It's obvious that is not true under the Supreme Court. So yes, we're going to have to get a new Supreme Court. And that probably is going to involve some version of expanding the Supreme Court and having many more appointees, so that this group that dominates it now, that all, by the way, perjured themselves.
Absolutely.
To get the jobs. And then all the things that the Senate majority leader, the Republican Senate majority leader, did to block Democrats from being able to appoint, and saying that, I will never abuse that, and then promptly abusing it for the next nominee. So you're right. This is just the first step, which is both a defense and a counterattack, a peaceful counterattack. But the point is, this group is thin, and it's super thin on talent as well. So if they don't have the numbers of lawyers to go in, and their lawyers aren't very good, and if they lie and those lies get exposed and some of them start losing their bar license, you're going to have a whole lot of stuff where lawyers will simply stop. Or they will leave. The worst lawyers, instead of the best lawyers, will also leave Trump in those circumstances. So this is a really good strategy, not just to start a resistance, but to actually get in trouble. Plus, it will enrage Trump. Can you imagine 1,000 whistleblowers bringing out his lies? And then it isn't just stopped with the state hearings. We want then to have whatever version works locally, often with folks like you, who are, what's their skill? Getting people to tell their story, right? And interacting with an audience. And we could do that without any parties being involved. That'd just be a citizen effort with hosts that are good at getting people to talk and tell their story. Some of them will be social media folks. Some of them will be local lawyers, because actually that's what we do as trial lawyers. We tell stories. You know, sometimes maybe it's the PTA, the teachers union. I don't care.
It's everything. It's all engaged. It's all engaged.
You're right.
And it has to be that way.
Hundreds of folks telling the inside story of how the corruption works and why the corruption concerns them. And that, and put my criminology hat on, where I study elite fraud and corruption. That's my thing, right? My specialty. Corruption kills.
Right.
And you just, and I don't have to tell Texas that.
It has to be. No, you don't have to tell Texas, especially what has happened. Not just, and we're not just talking a flood. We're talking a flood, a freeze, a drought. You can name all the things that have hit this state. Now, we are getting close on time here. First of all, what I want to say is that I'm going to want to have you on several times, my friend. I notice your government accountability project. It's interesting that the actual domain is whistleblower.org for the government accountability project, which I find quite apropos. Tell us a little bit about that and what you expect to do going forward.
Sure. Now, I'm not part of that organization. I'm an ally of that organization. And because I'm a serial whistleblower myself, I've known about them for a long time. And they didn't represent me ever, type of thing. But again, they are the premier organization, not just in the United States, but in the world. They have many volunteer lawyers who represent folks in these things. Prior to the Trump administration, although, and you won't be surprised by this, the last two Democratic administrations have been mostly hostile to whistleblowers.
I wonder why. I can understand that clearly.
Yeah, I knew it wasn't going to shock you. But sometimes Democrats are shocked.
Wow.
Again, most of the scar tissue, the abundant scar tissue on my back is been inflicted by Democratic politicians and elected officials. So not so much me. Anyway, they very much have created the whistleblower protections. They've helped shape those laws, which are, as weakened as they are now, still by far the best in the world. So again, America has this unique treasure compared to the rest of the world of whistleblowers, and particularly high level. And I don't mean they're important because they have higher position. I just mean they know more facts and they know more key documents, and they were in direct conversations with the top officials and can say, this guy is lying to you. Right? So there's a real premium when you have the more senior whistleblowers as well as to how much they can do. And it will drive Trump crazy.
Now, you've been working with other organizations. You were a part of, I think, working with producer Patrick Lovell with the Con and some other projects. Why don't you tell me quickly a little bit about those?
We can do more of this at future times, perhaps. But the Con is by far the best documentary about the causes of the great financial crisis. There's some very good documentaries that are fun, but they're not anywhere near the substance. And this one does not protect Democrats. It shows how both parties created the situation where we not only had a great financial crisis, but no one senior went to prison. even though it was driven overwhelmingly by fraud. And the greatest travesty is it was not just fraud, it was predation, particularly against Latinos and against Blacks. And those folks were manipulated into the supposed cause of the crisis as opposed to the principal victim of the crisis. The con reveals all of those things with a host of direct evidence of witnesses and the most honest, truly independent experts in the field. So, you can watch it on various web type things for very little money. So, if you want to get educated about what was done to you in the great financial crisis, I highly recommend reading it. And I have no monetary stake in it. I'm not talking my own.
What's another group as well?
I was a co-founder of the Bank Whistleblowers United. And I will simply tell this story. I had two companions, again, very senior people in two of the worst banks. They were the major villains in the crisis. And of course, they proved right. They went to the FBI and the Justice Department. They laid it all out. And in both cases, they refused to prosecute, just golden cases. And here's the biggest thing. It's now 17 years later. Neither of them is employable in the financial sector. And they knew that was going to happen. And here's the thing I would tell you about whistleblowers. We'd all do it again.
And, respect. That's all I can say. Respect. And we need more heroes out there, Bill. You're a hero. All these guys have worked with you are heroes. Give me a closer. What should I have asked you that I didn't? Quickly, and we'll take it out. We'll take it out from there.
So read the Indivisible Guide and ask what's not in it. Whistleblowers are never mentioned. There's only one reference to unions, and there's no reference to robber barons. We can do better. Respect for bringing all kinds of folks together, immense task, but their strategy still is to hunker down for 2 years and hope that you win the midterms. The nation cannot afford that.
Well, that's why you're here, my brother. That's why you're here, to remind folks of that. We can use what they've done with the No Kings as a pivot to a lot of what you're talking about here.
Yeah,
so
all my amendments are friendly amendments to them.
There you go. Exactly. So Bill Black, it has been my honor to speak to you. Thank you for all that you've done. Thank you for what you will be doing going forward. And you have a wonderful, my brother, rest of your day.
Thank you and your audience for giving us this opportunity. Take care.